Hi, Olly. First of all, thank you very much for joining me today. We have recently met during the polyglot gathering in Berlin. Very interesting gathering with lots of polyglots and many interesting people. And before getting started, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little about your language background and your general background, of course?
Yeah, sure. Well, hi Luca. Thanks very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. Yeah, so my name is Olly Richards. I run a blog and a podcast called "I Will Teach You a Language," and I kind of write about language learning. Well, I write about the stuff that I've learned from my experience. Basically, I speak 8 languages, not all totally fluently. Some of them better than others, but I've been learning languages for a long time. I started when I was 19. And when I was 19, I didn't speak any other languages at all. But I got really interested in learning languages, and I was actually living in London, and I found myself working. I just had a part-time job in a cafe in London, and I met all these people who were working with me there from all around the world. From places like France and Sweden, Japan, Australia, and I remember thinking to myself, well, all these people have come here and they speak English and they're doing such a good job. And then here's me in my own country and I don't speak anything. How cool would it be to be able to communicate with these people in their languages? And so that kind of set the spark in my mind.
What are your first personal steps when you want to learn a new language?
Okay, well, the first thing you've got to do is to get some material together because you need to build a foundation in the language. And so you have to get a couple of textbooks. Ideally, I recommend having at least 2 textbooks, if not 3. A bit of variety is good. And, I would literally say to myself, well, let's just work through this textbook from beginning to end. And I won't do every chapter. Some chapters are just not relevant to me. But I will go through and I'll get as much basic knowledge as I can. You've got to remember that on a very basic level, you need to just build this knowledge first. And the best way to do that is by just getting a textbook and working through it. It's not going to make you fluent, but at the very least you need to do it because then you're going to learn the main vocabulary, you're going to do some listening, some reading, you're going to get a good grounding. So I do that. And I also, and this is really important, I start speaking right from the beginning. So, I might work with a textbook for a couple of weeks or something just to get a bit of grounding, a bit of basic vocabulary. But then right away, I'm going to find a native speaker on a service like italki, and I'm going to have regular sessions with them. And I'm going to start asking them, basically, how do I say this? How do I say that? And just working with a native speaker right from the beginning.
Okay, so you already mentioned that a little bit about the fact that some people believe that you have to live in the country to learn a language and so on. So, for example, I know that you have lived abroad for a while, for a long time in different countries, but then I remember that for example, you started learning Mandarin Chinese while you were in Qatar, for example.
Yeah, it was actually Cantonese, China, not Mandarin, but Cantonese. Yeah, yeah. I started learning that when I was in Qatar. In fact, all of the languages that I've learned, every single language I've started learning from home. Every single one. I've only ever gone to the country after spending some time studying the language. And well, in the case of Cantonese, I've never really spent any time in Hong Kong at all. But all of the other languages, I have been there. I spent a lot of time in South America and in Japan, and in Egypt. I mean, that really helps to kind of consolidate. But, you can get to a really good beginner level just sitting at home.
Okay, so yeah, speaking about language immersion, so if you can share some experiences and tips to immerse yourself in the language, even when you are not living in the country where the language is spoken. How do you do that?
Listen, there are people I know who create these huge immersion environments, and so everything that they do at home is in the target language. There's a great guy called Katsumoto who runs a blog called All Japanese All the Time. And I mean, if you want to find out about immersion, just go and read his stuff because it's just insane. I'm not one of these 100% guys. I don't do everything. I do a bit usually, but I do a bit, but I try to do it consistently, and I think that's the key. So if you come to my house, most of the stuff's in English. You're not going to see piles of DVDs in French, or I don't do that so much. I get my immersion from basically three places. First one is from my textbooks and my audio programs and websites, anything I use for studying. The second is from movies and TV. I mean, I've learned when I learn Japanese and Cantonese, they have great. I really like TV series in the kind of TV dramas they have in Japan and Hong Kong. I can watch those all day long. So I can quite easily spend hours watching Hong Kong crime thrillers or something like that. So I tend to watch a lot of TV if I can find something I'm interested in. In Arabic, for example, I haven't been able to do that because I can't find anything that I'm interested in. It's just the way it is. But in Japanese and Cantonese, I can. So I get my immersion from textbooks, from movies and TV, and then the third thing is from speaking. And I will try to spend 3 or 4 hours every week talking with a native speaker. And so 3 or 4 days a week, I will sit down on Skype and have an hour-long, or maybe 45 minutes, chat with a native speaker. And so all of those things, when you combine them, adds up to quite a lot of time spent with the language. It's not complete immersion. If I really, excuse me, if I really had to learn a language really quickly, I might try to just immerse myself completely. Set my phone to Chinese and things like that. I'm just a bit lazy, and I'm not completely all in on this.
Yeah. These are very useful tricks and hacks, but they are not for everyone. I think so. Okay, it was interesting to have your point of view on that. And so the next question is, I am really interested in music and in the possibility to learn languages through music. And I know that you have, a music background. So why and how music can help when you want to learn a language, in your opinion?
It's funny that this is a question that I get asked so much, and it's difficult for me to really answer because I do have a music background. I played the piano since I was 6, and I went to music college. So I got quite serious training in music. So I don't know anything else. It's very difficult for me to answer. Well, if I didn't have the music background, how would it be different? I think that a number of things come into it. When you play music, you get used to performing, you get used to being with people and to being in public and stuff like that. So I think that probably gives me some advantage in terms of actually being out there with people. I'm quite a sociable person, so a lot of that I think I get from the music, the life as a musician. But I mean, I think the other main thing is in terms of accent and pronunciation. And I'm often told that I've got quite a good accent in the languages that I speak. And I think that must come down to the musical training in some way, because when you play music, and especially, my background is in classical and jazz, and especially when you play jazz, you have to have a very good ear because you have to get used to listening to the harmony and the melody, and your ear training has to be very, very, very good. So I think that I'm very used to listening to music and picking up the sounds and the nuances and the details. So I think the same is true with languages. And I wrote an article on Luca Lampariello's blog on the Polyglot Dream, all about how to develop a good accent. I thought a lot about this, and I realized that you've really got to pay very close attention to the melody of how people are speaking. You've got two parts to pronunciation. You've got the phonetics, it's actually pronouncing the sounds correctly, and then you've got the intonation, which is the kind of music of the language. And I think especially in the music of the language, I think I'm often quite good at that. And I think it's because I do listen to the melody of the way people speak, whether it's in Spanish, which is very kind of narrow range and not particularly expressive, or in Brazilian Portuguese, which is just like this, all up and down. or in Cantonese and Chinese, where you've got these crazy tones, 6 tones going all over the place. I think the ear does help from that, and I'm fairly sure that the music background has something to do with that. I'm not quite sure how much, but it has to have an impact.
And for people not having this music background, how do you think that music can? Do you think that music can help them? So listening to songs and a lot of music in the target language, do you think that this can be useful for them?
Definitely, and again, I mean that's something that I do a lot of. But only in the languages where I like the music from that place. So I mean, I listen to quite a lot of Cantonese music and Brazilian. I mean, I learned my Portuguese. A lot of my Portuguese was learned from listening to Brazilian music, samba, bossa nova. So just like with movies or with books or anything like that, if you can find songs and music that you like in your target language, then listen to that all day long. Learn the songs, learn the lyrics, sing the songs as much as possible. Because when you're learning, when you learn a song, what happens is you don't always get particularly useful vocabulary, because vocabulary from songs is often a bit strange. It can be quite formal or quite overly romantic or whatever. So the vocabulary can be a bit odd. But if you learn to imitate the songs, you get to listen very closely to pronunciation in particular. And so I think learning songs is a really, really good way of not only improving your pronunciation in the language, but also to improve your engagement and your motivation, and to kind of just get closer to the language. You have that cultural immersion. It's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, and maybe you can get also the intonation of the language. So you can improve your accent, getting the intonation of that language, listening to songs and music.
Yeah, I think it depends, because obviously the way that the intonation when you're singing is totally different from intonation when you're speaking. So there's definitely stuff to be learned. We don't speak like we sing. It's not the same thing. So I think you kind of have to take it as you have to take it as an overall thing, and you have to kind of use it as part of your toolbox to just learn and listen to lots of the language.
Okay, so you said that sometimes the vocabulary that you have in the song, in the music, is not so useful. But do you? I don't know if sometimes you pick up some words and sentences. I don't know. Sometimes you have particular expressions that are very, very nice to remember and to memorize. Do you pick up some words and phrases from songs, and how you memorize them? If so.
Yeah, no, you definitely can, and it depends on the nationality of the music. It depends on the type of song itself. What you'll find is if you learn songs, it will stick in your head automatically, because in order to memorize a song, you have to spend a lot of time with it. It's really hard to learn a song. It takes a long time. So you've got to, you're going to find that if you get to the point where you've learned a song, those phrases will stick in your mind. Now, that's not to say that you can immediately use them in speech when you're in conversation. Maybe the kind of vocabulary you're learning from the song is not really relevant to conversations. That might be the case too. But certainly what happens is after learning the words of a song, you're going to start to hear that vocabulary when other people speak. So it's not that songs by themselves are a really useful solution for language learning, but they are part of the bigger picture. So if you're learning songs and you're also reading books and you're also speaking to people, it all comes together. It all increases your overall knowledge and familiarity with the language.
So what is in your bigger picture? Well, what other resources are you using to get and pick up new vocabulary?
I base most of my vocabulary from speaking.
Okay.
Because that's what I want to do. I want to speak. And there are so many things you can learn. And everybody listening to this knows that when you're studying a language, you have so many options. You have your textbook, you have this other textbook, you have those novels you want to read, you have the stuff you're learning on the internet, you have emails, you have blogs, podcasts, videos. there's so much you can learn. The more effective you can be at choosing what you are going to learn next and self-directing, the better results and the faster progress you're going to make. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's say you like to read novels, and let's say you're learning Spanish and you like to read novels, and so you read lots of Garcia Marquez novels. You're going to learn a certain kind of vocabulary, which is not particularly useful for speaking. Right? So if you read his novels, you're going to learn words like el obispo, for example, which is the bishop. I mean, I remember when reading a book, I can't remember, I think it was Love in the Time of Cholera or something like that, El amor en el tiempo de cólera. I might be mistaken, but one of the words that kept coming up is el obispo, and I didn't know what it was, and I eventually looked it up in the dictionary, and it's like the bishop. Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never said the word bishop in English, ever, nor in any other language. And so it's just not relevant. It's very interesting,
especially
very cultural.
In a normal conversation,
Yeah, exactly.
You never say it.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in the Vatican, maybe, but it's just not directly relevant. So it's very interesting, very good, and all that. But if your aim is to speak, it's not. You're on a different path, So what I do is, like I said, I had these regular conversations 3 or 4 times a week. And from these sessions with the native speaker, there's lots of vocabulary that comes out, words that I don't know, things that I want to say. I write that stuff down and I learn that.
Okay.
So what that means is my ability to speak is always improving because I'm only learning stuff that I need to use in conversation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And yeah, of course. And you're using, the core, the most important part that you need to use to speak, because in books and in reading material, you have a lot of vocabulary that we do not use in the while speaking, because we use a very limited range of vocabulary and words when we speak. So actually, you're getting before the most important part, so the most useful part for you, because your main goal is to speak rapidly and quickly, I imagine.
Yeah, and this is particularly important for certain languages where you have lots of different registers. So, for example, in Chinese or Japanese, you have or Korean, you have lots of different levels of formality, and textbooks will tend to teach you the polite form of the language, right? So you're going to end up learning stuff that's very good language, very useful for writing or for informal situations, but no one will ever speak like that. And when I learned Japanese, it very quickly became clear to me, because in Japanese the textbooks will teach you a variety of what they call keigo, and keigo is formal Japanese, polite Japanese. But if you go to Japan and you make some friends, no one speaks like that. It's not useless. In fact, it can be very useful. But again, it's just down to your priority. What's your priority? And for me, the priority for me is always speaking with people, making friends and speaking with people. So I just base everything I do around that activity, speaking with people. And I use that as my source.
Okay. And any project for next languages?
Yeah, German.
German, okay.
German. And I'll tell you why. Partly because, as you know, we met in Berlin recently, and I went to Berlin as well last year. That was really great. I love Berlin. It's just a great country, and German has always fascinated me. To be honest, the other thing is that my last 3 languages, which were Japanese, Cantonese, and Egyptian, were really, really hard. Really hard, and it's been really tough to learn these languages. I'm looking forward to something a little bit closer to home. A little bit. I'm not saying German is going to be easy. I'm sure it's not, but it's going to be easier than all these crazy languages like Cantonese with 10,000 Chinese characters to learn, and Egyptian Arabic with this crazy pronunciation. So I think I'm looking forward to German as maybe a shorter term project, which will hopefully be quite gratifying and easier to learn, and also to be able to read, because I haven't been able to read fluently in my last 3 languages because of the script, learning a different script. So I'm hoping it's just going to be a little bit easier. We'll see. I'm going to hopefully start German soon, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
What's my YouTube channel updates on?
I'd like to learn German as well. So maybe one day we will speak in German.
I'm sure we will, man. For sure. For sure.
Okay.
We're both young.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. It's been really, really nice to talk with you, to discuss about these topics. And so hear you soon again. And thank you very much for your tips.
Yeah.
And hacks.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ben. And good luck to everyone out there. And see you on the internet.
Hear you soon. Bye.
Cheers, Luca.